So hey everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we are going to be making a craft that truly signifies for me the meaning of Christmas, and we're going to be making a little manger scene. Now I got this little house looking thing at the dollar store, and the fabric had already started lifting on it, which wasn't a problem because I knew I was going to deconstruct it anyway. But I was thinking in the store, oh, this must not be glued on here very well, should be really easy to get off. Well, it was a little bit harder than I thought, so I had to go get one of my kitchen utensils to try to get underneath this little glued-on sign, and I got it off. It did take a little bit of the wood off the back, but it's still sturdy enough. I'll save that for another project. And I just was reefing and realized that the fabric was actually glued in between that upper top frame there and the base. So I got my little X-Acto knife, and I'm just very carefully cutting the edges of this off as close to that rim as possible, and then getting it ripped off of there. It did take a couple of tries for some reason. I mean, I think this X-Acto knife came from the dollar store, so maybe it's not the sharpest, but eventually I was able to get it cut to where I was able to get it all off. But you can see now underneath I have a little bit of glue residue and some fabric residue, so I'm taking my little finger sander and I'm just very gently getting the rest of that off, and it didn't take a whole lot. And now I'm using my Waverly Antique Wax because I want to make this frame look like a barn. And so by adding this color, it does. And if you could help me out by giving this video a thumbs up if you like this kind of content, it'll help push my videos out to other viewers. And of course, if you'd love to subscribe, we would love to have you. But see how putting this antique wax actually makes it look more like a barn color. So I'm just going to continue that around all of the edges, even though we are going to be putting something on that ridge line. Now here's the picture that I found. I go to the thrift stores and I find books. This was not an old book. It was just like a Christmas memories book, but it had a bunch of vintage looking scenes. Now the frame that is around this I think is really pretty, but it's not anything that's going to fit on the project that I'm doing today. So I'm going to very gently bend it so that I can make a little nick cut and get my scissors in there. And that way I can cut my manger scene out and carefully go all around the edges to where I'm not going to ruin that border frame, so that of course I can save that border frame for another project, right? Perfect. Now I'm just putting my picture on here to see where it is going to fit and how I want to position it. And as I'm looking at it, I decided that I wanted to put a background between the picture and the actual wood frame. So I have this old music book that I found at the thrift store, and I found the Away in a Manger. And I thought, well, I'm just going to use the sheet music because that's exactly what we're doing. Although you'll see coming up, it doesn't really make any difference. But I just am taking the sheets of music out of the page, and I took the whole song out. But I put this one on and I just kind of pressed with my fingers where I would need to cut out for the peak to make a little dent in it, and then again down the sides. And then now on the sides, I'm cutting just a little bit larger than the frame needs to be. But as far as the peak, I'm being very precise and following that exactly where it bent. And the reason why is because the overhang I can sand off, but the rest I cannot. So I'm just fitting it up there to make sure that that's perfect. And my bottom piece as well. And had I thought ahead, I would have just used the whole sheet of music that I had pulled out as well and just made one solid piece. But instead I ended up with two. Hindsight, I know, every crafter has it. But now I'm just making sure that it matches up where I need it to be, and I'm going to put a nice layer of Mod Podge over the entire surface of the bottom. And then on the backing of my top piece, and I'm going to slide that all up in there nice and snug so there's no gaps. I'm going to take my little tool and just very gently rub it on there to make sure there's no air bubbles. And then I'm going to repeat the process with my bottom piece. And then I'm going to Mod Podge over the top of all of this. And then now that it's dried a little bit, I'm kind of eyeballing where I need to cut the corners off of my picture, and then also the under section that will show through, I decided I wanted to take some more of that antiquing wax and just tone it down so that it matches more of the barn looking theme. So I'm just going to take my paintbrush and rub some antiquing wax around all of those edges, and then kind of dab it here and there with a paper towel just to soften it up. So just working my way around the other side and up around the peak. And then as I got done here, I realized that I needed to actually put a little bit more up on the peak because it showed when I put my picture on there just to give it a test, and then down at the bottom as well. And then once I get that all done, I went outside and got some pine cones, and these were still wet. So I put them in the oven at about 200 for a couple hours. And so they opened up. Now I'm going to stick my needle nose pliers down in there, and I am going to pinch off the top. See that little pretty rosette there? And I will save those for another project. And then I'm going to take my needle nose pliers and go all the way down to the base when I grab a hold of each one of the little individual pieces and just kind of gently wiggle them while I'm pulling them out. That way it ensures I get them all out in one piece instead of breaking them. And now that I have a nice little pile, what I'm going to do is this is going to be my roof, and I am going to put them on the front side edge as well. So I'm just kind of sizing up a few pieces to see which ones I want to use to start the bottom. And then once I am ready to go, I take my hot glue gun, and now these are kind of cup shaped on the bottom, so the hot glue really only adheres at the very tip, the base, and a little bit on the edges. So it's kind of a delicate process not to glue your fingers, but I am just going to work from the bottom up so that they're overlapping properly, and that's what they look like on the front. And now I'm going to work on the sides. And sorry, this isn't exactly in frame. I was trying to do this as quickly as I could because getting these on here is a little bit of a challenge. But here's what they look like. And now I just need a couple more at the peak to round off the top. And there are some gaps in between the side piece and the top of the roof, and I am going to fill those in a little bit. But while that's all kind of setting up, I am going to take my finger sander and I am just going to rub it along the edge of the pieces of paper that are sticking over the sides so that I can pull those off, and the end result looks like a nice finished piece of paper that was made perfectly for this project. And if you don't have one of these, I'll try to remember to put the link down below. Now this little picture, I kind of thought maybe I should have put it on here before I put the roof on, but the problem was I really didn't want to get hot glue strings all over the picture. So I'm just making sure that I can fit it up and underneath those pieces of pine cone that I glued onto the roof, and I could. So now I'm going to take and Mod Podge all of this again, and the back side. And now slipping this up and underneath isn't as easy, of course, as when it's dry because it's a little bit tacky. So I'm just using my fingers and wiggling it back and forth. And then I had to take my little X-Acto knife and lift up a couple of the little pieces of pine cone so that I could get it stuck back under there. And I ended up doing that on both sides until I got the picture perfectly positioned where I wanted it to be. And then I took my little tool and very gently again made sure that there was no bubbles in there. And I applied another layer over the top. And now I was thinking about making the edges of this manger scene a little more rustic looking and not so straight, but I didn't want to destroy any of the picture, so I just left it straight like that. Now here I am coming back in, and I am just going to be gluing a few more of those pine cone pieces up on the ridge there now that I have the picture in, so that it kind of covers up that blank spot that we had. And now I am going to take and put another layer of these little pine cone pieces to hide that space between the front lip of the barn and the roof. And this little star I got at Hobby Lobby in a pack, and they're pretty bright gold, which isn't necessarily my thing. So I like to take some gold rub and buff and tone it down a little bit. And then I'm going to put a generous amount of glue on the back, and then I'm going to glue it to the front of my manger. And now I'm also going to take some of this rub and buff, and I'm going to just very gently put a little bit of it on the roof, kind of to simulate where a star would be shining. And then I'm also going to take it and I'm going to put it on the picture itself and just kind of streak it down into the scene. And it's kind of hard to see in this picture, but in real life it does show up, and it gives us this very pretty gold shimmery glow. And I thought the sides were a little plain and I wanted it to look again more like a barn. So I am just going to very, very gently put a thin layer of hot glue down and start winding some of my jute twine on there, or laying down some of my jute twine. And again, very, very slowly and just little bits by bits, because I don't want any of that glue showing through onto the front of my twine. And as I get back to the other side, I'm just going to snip it off. And I'm going to put a little dab of hot glue on there and get that tacked down into place. And now this is what it looks like, but to me it was too light. So I went and took some more of my antiquing wax on a little paintbrush, and I very gently went around and I painted my jute twine with that antiquing wax, so the end result would look more like the sides of a barn and you are peeking into the barn. You can already tell it's making a big difference. So here's what we look like at the end. So now I'm just taking a couple of my stacking Jenga pieces that I just got at the dollar store, and I'm putting two of them together. Now I'm gluing that onto the back of my picture so that it can stand up. Here's what it looks like when it can stand up by itself. So here's the finished project. Let me know what you think of it. I think it's really precious. I love being able to use the rusticness of the pine cones. And it just looks like a little sweet manger scene, a vintage manger scene. So thanks for hanging out with me. We'll see you in the next video.